Hi guys! Today we are going to be talking about how to discuss money with your partner or spouse in a relationship. Welcome to my financial literacy channel, where my goal is to empower, inform, and provide the agency to support Canadians from negatives to millions. You can find out more in the links below or connect with me there as well. So the first thing I want to say is that there is no one way to handle finance with your spouse. Every single partnership I have ever worked with in my decade-plus career has done things differently. Every partnership I've personally had, all of my relationships have handled money differently. And the reason for that is that we all have a different history with money, and money is highly psychological. So it's not something that comes with any sort of rule book. I want to start by saying that it's going to be scary, unfortunately. That's probably the reason you're watching this video, is you don't know where to start. So I'm going to tell you how to start, how to have that conversation, and how to set you and your partner up for success so that you both know where you're at in terms of your finances and you can work towards your goals together, which is the most important thing. I suggest that you do things naturally. So how do you guys often talk about things? What's the most natural way for you to communicate? Are you guys email people? Do you talk about things on Sunday brunch? Is it all about having a quick chat on a Monday night after work? Whatever it is that works for you guys, that's the way to start the conversation. The other thing you want to do is schedule it. So make sure that you put time in your calendar to actually get it done. You don't want to just jump on someone with something so big and so scary, potentially, especially when you don't know what somebody's personal financial hangups are. Honestly, asking about somebody's financial history is akin to asking about their medical history or their relationship history. Some people are more willing to share than others, and I'm sure you know your partner better than I do to be able to tell where they stand and how willing they are to have that conversation and how comfortable they are having that conversation. You might have to do it in chunks. You might have to slowly work your way up. What were your parents like? What did you talk about in your family? That's a really, really nice icebreaker to get a feel for how each of your parents handled finances, because that's going to have an immediate impact on what your thoughts are on finances. As an example, I worked with a woman who, one of the first things she told me was, I never want to be like my dad. I need to start saving right now. That's a pretty big deal. That's going to tell you a very, very different story than somebody else who's saying, oh, we've always been comfortable. Like, I don't know, we'll make the money. Let's just focus on the lifestyle. Two totally different attitudes. And as I said, it might have to be in chunks. Like maybe you have one conversation one week, the next conversation the next week, and so on and so forth. How can you afford all of our dinners out, for example? Are you comfortable paying that much? Should we be cautious around how much we're spending on dates? Those are all really good icebreaker questions to kind of start the conversation. Here's where I can actually recommend that you bring in a professional. I do that a lot for clients. Being the third party, the objective third party, and asking questions about how much do you make? What are you spending every month? What are your overhead expenses? How much does rent cost? How much does it cost you to pay your car loan, for example, if that's on the table? Do you have any debt? What kind of debt is it? Is it student loan debt? Is it credit card debt? How did you get there? What about your savings? Are you an investor? Have you built up investment accounts? Have you purchased insurance policies? All of these are different components to somebody's personal financial plan that until now you don't know anything about. But it also brings you both out onto a totally open and totally even playing field. If it's not the professional in your life, then I'm going to give you the tip that what you'd want to do at the very least is print out some sort of form, find a net worth statement somewhere that you two can both fill in so that you have all the numbers in front of you. And remember to be completely non-judgmental. Judging someone on their financial past or their current financial picture is akin to judging them on how much they eat or how much they weigh. It is what it is. You know, there's a lot of factors that come into it. As I mentioned in the past, family history is huge. What were you trained to do? What did you learn to do? And or what did you train yourself to do instead of the way your family acted, as well as what the circumstances were. You know, were you laid off at some point? Were you in were you having to deal with a lot of medical issues at some point? On the other hand, were you lucky enough to stumble into a career that paid you really, really well off the front end? Or maybe you weren't lucky at all. Maybe you busted your butt from 16 onwards, and that's why you have the investments that you do. Any of those things are, again, very difficult to share, but important to get out there so that you guys are both aware of where you stand. My next suggestion really is to talk habits and history. So what are your habits? When I'm talking about habits, I mean, do you go out for, oh man, I dated a guy who bought himself Timmy's every single day at work. Let me tell you, that relationship didn't last, obviously, because I'm not that type. It doesn't make sense to me to be spending my money like that. But that was his habit, and there are lots of people out there like that. There are other habits that include, do you save $100 off every paycheck? Is it your habit to spend $10,000 a year on travel? Any of these habits are really important to be aware of, because those things make or break a relationship at the end of the day. If you can't stand spending 10 grand a year on travel, well, you're probably not going to understand what your spouse is trying to do with their money for very long. You may get frustrated because you'd like to apply your money in different places. If your habits involve leaning on debt, I have a great client example where she is totally debt averse. She doesn't want anything to do with it. She spends every single dollar paying down any credit cards, any student loans, anything else that she had on her plate. And he is like, you know what, I'm good. I've been making money my whole career. I can pay off that credit card anytime I like. If the balance comes up a little, it comes up a little, I pay it off, no big deal. Those are two totally opposite attitudes that have definitely come into contention a few times in my office. But the thing is, they're still perfectly compatible as a couple. They just need to be aware of together that these are their separate attitudes towards their finances. My next point has to do with finding the right time to merge your finances. You don't ever have to. I'm going to start with that. As I mentioned at the beginning, every couple I've ever worked with has had a different approach to their finances. So in some cases, these couples will have completely separate bank accounts, completely separate expenditures, and maybe they trade off on she pays the mortgage, he pays the bills around the house, or vice versa. In other cases, I've got clients who amalgamate everything. They have one bank account. It all goes in, it all goes out. It's their family money, and that's that. I have other clients who, quite simply, at the end of the day, will manage all of their finances totally independently. 9 times out of 10, I personally prefer to work with both parties when I'm talking about a couple, because at the end of the day, usually your goals are aligned. But when it comes down to actually making your own financial decisions, your investment accounts can look very, very different. I have a couple who, she is incredibly conservative. She's got a little bit nervous, but her husband is out there picking stocks, looking at it every single day, buying and trading depending on what's appropriate and what he finds attractive, really. 2 totally different investment approaches that, when they are both aware of what's happening, is very comfortable for both of them, because he knows she's always got his back. If his investments don't work out well, she has the money for both of them in the long term for their retirement plan. On the other side, she knows that he is going to be out there chasing return. He's going to be bringing more money in, ideally, if everything works out appropriately. And between the two of them, they're going to see a very successful retirement. Once you guys have decided to merge, you guys need to decide what's yours, what's mine, and what's ours. The other thing that's important to identify is who is responsible for what. And I want to talk about actually a very bad example of family financial management that I ran into several years ago, which was a husband who had been making sufficient amounts to be really, really close to retirement. He was ready to stop working at any time. He had his savings down. But in terms of the way that they split the finances in the household, he was paying the mortgage and she was paying basically everything else, including groceries and whatever for the children. At the end of the day, when we had a conversation, he was comfortable and she was drowning in debt and stress and all of these other things. So the responsibilities for the finances in the house were unevenly split. The other things to talk about from a practical standpoint: who's going to pay the bills, who is going to be taking care of scheduling, who is going to be taking care of professionals. And when I say that, I mean there's all the emotional labor that comes into organization, to bill payment, to setting up appointments and all those other things. So making sure you have that conversation at the same time or through one of your many, many money conversations with your spouse. The last thing I'm going to bring up here is how do you keep each other in the loop? So I mentioned before scheduling a time. This is not a once and done conversation. Money should never be a once and done conversation. It changes all the time. With all my clients, I suggest they look at their finances at least annually. When we're talking about a household, I would suggest on a monthly basis. I mean, if you really want to push it, maybe quarterly, as in every 3 months or so. But realistically, having a weekly conversation is probably the healthiest. Where are you at today? What have we spent lately? What's coming up? Just so that you guys are both aware of where you want your money to be going and how much you have to play with. By keeping each other in the loop this way too, it builds an environment of trust. It builds an environment of transparency, and neither one of you should come home with a $750 shopping bill feeling guilty about it. If that was planned for, great. If it wasn't planned for, at least you should be able to share it knowing that you're not going to be judged for it and that it is a part of either your personal financial decisions, which is totally within your right, or perhaps it's something that you guys need to discuss in terms of prioritizing your finances in a different way. At the end of the day, have fun and be flexible. Keep going back to it. Keep going back to your spouse, your partner. You love them. So you will love them and their money together. By having these conversations and, as I said, bringing in the professional, you'll be able to be very clear on what you're doing with your money and ideally what you're going to be doing with your money going forward as well. So I hope I gave you some good insights. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, or comment for more about your money. If your questions are larger than the contents of this video, please don't be afraid to reach out to the CFP in your life for more professional support. Or you can connect with me by clicking the links below and texting, emailing, or signing up for a free 30-minute phone call to point you in the right direction. I am currently taking on new clients and I am always happy to help. Until next time, wishing you financial security and success.